so we are going to use those ideas that you just learned about perhaps in our previous video about light and light properties and this idea of a ray model of light. We're going to use those ideas to explain how a pinhole camera works. And I'm going to have you do that by making a pinhole camera. We're not going to really use film. It's going to be a little mock pinhole camera. But we have you make one and then experience what you see in that camera and use your ideas of light traveling in all directions from its source and that it travels in a straight line in all those directions. And how can we use those ideas to explain what is happening inside that camera? And then I'm going to challenge you to make a few predictions about how can I make changes to the image I see, or what would happen to the image if I made changes to the camera. All right, so a little craft project today. I want you to get a few supplies handy. I'll tell you what they all are, and you can go gather them before we get started. So the first thing that you're going to need is a toilet paper tube, so an empty toilet paper tube that you might have in the recycle bin. You're going to need a piece of aluminum foil, not too big, doesn't have to be very big, it just has to be big enough to fit over one end of your toilet paper tube. You're also going to need a piece of translucent paper. What works really well is wax paper or parchment paper, tracing paper, something that's translucent but still has a good firmness to it, unlike tissue paper that can rip very easily. And it's pretty good, pretty see-through-y. You're also going to need some opaque paper, and the best thing that works is black construction paper. I did not have black construction paper at home, so I used the brown paper that we get in so many of our packages these days. And I just made multiple layers of it. One layer is too translucent, but multiple layers of it forms a pretty good opaque surface. You don't want to use something like cardstock. We want to be able to roll this. We're going to roll this around our toilet paper tube. So we want to have it to be a little bit flexible. You're certainly going to need some tape because we're going to tape that roll around our tube. We're also going to tape down our aluminum foil and our parchment paper. And then you're going to need something to puncture a hole, something to make the actual pinhole. Paper clip works really well, thumbtack, small nail, something on that order. All right, so if you don't have those materials handy, go ahead and pause the video, go gather them. If you don't, have those materials right now, you're welcome to watch the video. I would encourage you to go gather them and make sure you do this and experience this by yourself. So pause the video, go grab that stuff. All right, so hopefully you have all of those materials with you now. We're gonna start with the toilet paper roll and the parchment paper. And you're simply going to put the parchment paper on one end of the toilet paper roll. This is going to serve as our screen. So the image is actually going to appear on this parchment paper. You want to make sure that you are getting the parchment paper as smoothly down on that toilet paper tube as possible. And then you will just simply use your tape to tape that parchment paper on there. Again, trying to get that screen, this part, as flat as possible. If you go to a movie theater and the screen wasn't flat, it wouldn't be a very good image to look at. Same idea here. We want as flat as possible as a screen. We also want it as smooth as possible along the sides so that when we wrap this in its casing, it doesn't have any bumps that could let light leak through. So go ahead and do that. Secure it with the tape. Pause the video while you do that. And when you're done, come on back and we'll do step 2. All right, hopefully you've done step 1. Step 2 is very similar to step 1. We're going to do it with the aluminum foil. So in this case, you're going to put the aluminum foil on the opposite end of your toilet paper tube, and you're going to do the exact same thing. You're going to secure it tightly. You want as flat a surface as possible. And again, we want to make sure that these sides are as smooth as possible, okay? So that when we wrap this contraption inside of our opaque paper, the black construction paper, or in my case, the brown paper, we don't have any bumps that might let light through. So go ahead and do the same thing with your aluminum side. Pause the video and come back when you're ready. All right, so you've done both sides of your tube. It's now time to wrap it into that opaque, flexible material. You want to take the aluminum side, and you want to have the long end of the paper, You want to put the aluminum side on the edge of that long end so that the aluminum is at the end of the paper, okay, facing outward. The screen will be inside our tube. And then you're just going to roll that paper around the tube as tight as you can, making an elongated tube out of our paper. So you have a nice elongated tube. You're going to secure it with tape. And so go ahead and do that. Pause the video. All right. So I have mine all secured here. Nice and secured. I have a nice smooth tube. Very little light's going to get through. My last step is to puncture a hole in the end of my aluminum. So take your paper clip and just make a nice tiny little hole, a little bit wider than the paper clip. A thumbtack thickness actually works really well, kind of the classic thumbtack thickness. And make that hole. I'll kind of show you the size that works pretty good. If you can, that'll focus on there. You kind of see that hole in there maybe a little bit. And you should be all set. All right, now it's time to use this. We need bright light, okay? We need a lot of light in order for this to work. Going outside on a nice bright sunny day, hopefully it's sunny where you are right now and warm would be good. Nice bright sunny day is going to be great. Even a nice winter day, even when it's cloudy, if you're somewhere where there's snow and it's winter time, that'll work really well too. You just need bright light. Indoor house lights typically are not bright enough, so it really does take getting outside, and that's good for you anyway. Okay. You can also look through a window to the outside. So I'm going to demonstrate that here because I have a window right here. You're just going to look into the end opposite the aluminum foil. So that pinhole, that's where the light's coming in. And just look inside and you should see something on your screen. If you don't, look at a horizon, okay? So try to look at something very distinct between like trees and the sky, for example. I want you to make an observation about what you see, and we'll talk about it when you come back. So pause the video and go do that. All right, so hopefully you went and did that, and you paused that video, and you went and looked inside the screen, and what did you see? Well, you should have seen the horizon, whatever you were looking at, upside down on your screen, okay? It's not going to be crystal clear and super bright, but you should have been able to make out the trees or the people or the cars or the houses, whatever you were looking at in that horizon, and they should have been upside down. So what I want you to do is go draw a ray diagram as to why does the image flip upside down in a pinhole camera. What about light tells us that that image is going to do that, and can I draw that? And there's a video on our list, on our series here, that walks you through that process. And when you're done doing that, I'm going to challenge you to think about, what happens if I make some changes, or I want to make changes to the image? What would happen if I made changes to the camera? What would happen if I used, instead of a toilet paper tube, I used a paper towel tube, a longer tube? Or I cut the toilet paper tube in half and I used a shorter tube? What would happen if I made my hole bigger in the front with the same size tube that I started with? How does making a change to the physical properties of the camera affect the image? See if you can make a prediction about that. Draw it, practice the ray diagramming to see if your prediction can be justified, and then go try it and see if what happens is what you predicted, resolving, of course, any issues. I would also challenge you to think about, well, what would I have to do physically to the camera if I wanted to change the image? If I wanted the image to be crisper, or if I were more in focus, if I wanted the image to be bigger or smaller. And of course, same thing. Go try those in a ray diagram format. See how that might look if you attempted that with a ray diagram, and then go try it out. Make your whole, or do whatever you predicted. You might have to make a few pinhole cameras to do it, but I encourage you to try that. So predicting what we think is going to happen, testing that, and resolving those predictions by using the ray diagram model is a great way to solidify these ideas. Nice job.